and welcome to Building High Performance Cultures, a weekly series where we talk with executives from top organizations about how they built high performance cultures and how they're leveraging their culture as competitive advantage. I'm Marty Parker, the President and CEO of Waterstone Human Capital, and my guest today is the Chief Executive Officer of Klick Health, Lori Grant. Lori, welcome to Building High Performance Cultures.
Thank you so much, Marty. Super happy to be here.
So I'll just tell you a little bit more about Lori. Lori has dedicated her entire career to healthcare marketing. She has over 30 years of strategic leadership and industry experience, both on the client and the agency sides. And before being named Klick CEO, she served as president for 6 years and the senior vice president of brand development and digital strategy for 7 years, contributing significantly to the company's overall growth and ongoing success. Now, previously, Lori held senior level roles at large global network agencies and spent the first 11 years of her career within large pharmaceutical companies, over-the-counter, and specialty marketing groups. Now, Lori's a highly regarded thought leader. She's been recognized, get ready for this, there's a lot of things here, on the WXN Top 100 Most Powerful Women in Canada, Pharma Voice's 100 Most Inspiring People in Health, and M&M Magazine's Hall of Femme, and she's also been named a PM 360 Elite Mentor. That's a lot of things, and I'm sure there's more. Now, Lori, for people who aren't familiar with Klick Health, tell us a little bit about the organization and about the culture that you have there.
Well, thank you, Marty. And yeah, very excited to talk about Klick Health. Klick Health, we are a commercialization partner in the life sciences space, and that includes pharmaceutical and biotech companies, as well as broader organizations. And you know, we're very, very proud of the fact that what we do every single day is help companies bring solutions and medications to patients, all the way from rare disease, all the way through to more mass market products. I'm very excited to help bring those solutions. Now, culture is this really interesting topic because culture is not the trappings that you offer. Culture is about the people and the principles that you put together and how you help bring them to life. And we are very, very proud of how we do that.
And you should be. How do you define high performance at Klick Health, Lori?
So high performance is this interesting juxtaposition of making sure that we bring the right balance of drive and optimism to the table. And when we think about drive and optimism, when we're hiring people and I'll go through what hiring means at Klick. What we're really looking for are people with an essence and character, and that essence and character of optimism and drive and kindness, and being empathetic and trustworthy and inclusive and creative in the way that you bring solutions together. And that really helps people who intuitively lean into our core principles. Our core principles are people first, always people first. Our core principles include hacker roots, an entrepreneurial spirit, playing the long game, and outcomes over optics. And all of those things, when you put it together, creates this amazing culture. And those core principles are the lens through which we make all of our core decisions, always starting with people first.
Yeah, and listen, I'm really interesting. I mean, you've had a long history in the organization, internally kind of rising up to the CEO, which is great for so many people to hear. So as a leader, how do you approach corporate culture, and specifically at Klick, and what helped shape your approach?
So, you know, at its very core, Marty, organizations are really just a collection of people and principles. And when you really think about that, and you think about the principles that you put in place, which we just spoke of, and you think about the behaviors that you are looking for from your organization and from the people that you bring into it, we just spoke about some of the very essence and character. It creates this amazing virtuous cycle. And when we think about it through this lens. If we hire and cast our teams and take all the care and attention there, then you are actually creating your culture at the very foundation. And so hiring and casting our teams for success is one of the most important things that we do as leaders. And I know personally, I interview easily 15 or 20 people a week because it is such an important part of how we create the success that we do. And then once you hire amazing people, we onboard them incredibly well. And once we onboard them into the company, what we do, how we want to work together, how we want to show up together, you actually cast and create these amazing, happy teams. And what happens when you have happy teams and people who want to work together and want to lean in on each other and want to make each other be better and more successful? They project that onto our clients. And what happens with clients? You have happy teams, you have happy clients because you're bringing them amazing solutions and they can feel the energy from your team and how you want to work together. And what happens when you have happy clients? They reward you with their business. And so for us, it's about creating that happy team environment that creates happy clients who then reward us by giving us their business. And it creates this virtuous cycle. And that is exactly how we approach the organization and really employ the people first core principle.
I want to talk about a specific execution of that because in Klick Health is a 2019 Canada's Most Admired Corporate Cultures winner.
Thank you.
And well, thank you. And in reading the 2019 submission, the award submission for Klick, one phrase that caught my eye was the relentless pursuit of awesome. What a great turn of phrase. Talk about that, this pursuit of awesome, and how that really resonates on a day in, day out basis with your culture and with your people.
Yeah, happy to. And yes, look, the relentless pursuit of awesome is about setting a bar. It's about setting a very high bar. And interestingly enough, people want a high bar. They want to be able to reach for the stars, as you will. And we've really set ourselves and our commitment to constant innovation and constantly inoculating ourselves against the status quo. And when you think about that, what you're actually doing is saying, we need to eliminate mediocrity. Why would we ever accept mediocrity? And you don't have to accept that. And so you can push beyond those boundaries and don't rest on your laurels. So we consider ourselves as an organization always in beta. And that means that we're always evolving, we're always innovating. And because of that, progress doesn't really sit still. And so when we think about relentlessly pursuing awesome, and people gravitate to that turn of phrase, as you said, what may have been awesome yesterday won't necessarily be awesome tomorrow because there is evolution. And so as a result of that, what you're actually doing is giving your entire team the permission to proceed, the permission to challenge what maybe worked yesterday but might not tomorrow. And it just creates, again, this virtuous cycle of people having the permission to say, we might be able to do that a little bit differently and better, more efficiently, and be okay to do it. So we're very proud of that.
Well, and it's just a wonderful turn of phrase that is aspirational, not just on a big picture standpoint, but in everything you do. I just think it's fantastic. Lori, you talked about the these 5 principles, and you mentioned about people first. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the tools and the programs you have in place to support that people-focused culture.
Absolutely. So people first, and wow, what a year to put your principles and values into action.
Right.
So I want to go backwards to come forwards, if I might, on
Sure.
that question. So here I am, a new CEO for a mere 3 months, and a global pandemic hits. And as a CEO, you have a tremendous responsibility to your organization to set the tone and lead the team through what are going to be, or potentially going to be, some very tough times. And the very first lens through which we looked at what were we going to do in order to hit this challenge head on was a people first lens. And let's not forget, as leaders, all of us, there was no one to call to say, hey, what was your playbook for when this occurred in your organization? There was no peer to ask or to have led you, because we all faced a global pandemic for the very first time in our careers. And so through that people first lens, the very first thing that we did was ask everyone to work from home. And, very, very early, we use data science as our guide. We're scientists. We have a very strong data science team, and they helped us with the mapping and modeling of what this virus may do. And remember, we work in healthcare, so we're very familiar with what a virus is and what it has the potential to do. And our modeling showed very early that this was going to do exactly what it did. And so we made the decision very early. And as a leader, I often get asked now, was that a tough decision? And the answer was no, not at all, because it is people first. And there's nothing more important than the safety of your team and the safety of their families. And by extension, the safety of our clients and their families. So that's one of the first things you can do is live your principles and make them not just words on a piece of paper, but live your principles. But when we kind of extend that out to this people-focused culture, it is about how we hire and the experience that we create. We often talk about the experience advantage that we create for our clients, but also for our teams. It is about how you onboard your team, being mindful, putting an actual program in place, not just a folder on a desk or not just a peer buddy, but an actual program that someone will follow to onboard into your organization. And what's really interesting in today's world, and we all face it as leaders, we are hiring people virtually. They have only met us over Zoom. And so I look forward to the day when we walk through our doors again, but we are going to have this moment as leaders where you are going to be meeting people that you have spoken to for close to a year and you have never met them. And they are going to have that new employee feel of, I've never been to the building, so I don't know where to go. And I don't know how to get anything done, or where's the printer, or all of these things that help you do your job successfully. We are going to have that all happening, and we need to consider that and what that looks like for all of these new employees who aren't new, and yet they are. So it will be this incredible metamorphosis of how we change as organizations. But we also have mentorship programs in place, mentorship programs for parents, mentorship programs for women, for people of color, for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have huge programs and education programs in place for the consciously curious. So whether that's our monthly breakfast meeting where we're sharing work across the organization, that's a weekly stand-up call where myself and some of the other leaders are speaking to the organization transparently and honestly about where we are with the COVID situation and what our perspective is on the company. There's so many things, but it really does come down to, it's not the trappings. And if the last year has taught us anything, it is that. You either had a strong culture coming into COVID where you had to transition to meetings like this where we're on Zoom, or you didn't. And that got amplified in this situation. And frankly, I couldn't be prouder of the amplification at Klick, because there really is something different at Klick. And culture is really nothing more than how you make people feel every single day.
Oh, wonderful. What a great answer to coming through what is an incredibly difficult time. And I think if you were set up for success, this was the time that proved it out for sure. Now, your entrepreneurial spirit at Klick principle is also a great one, and one that I imagine really drives a culture of innovation. But what does entrepreneurial spirit look like at Klick, and how have you been able to instill that principle across your team members?
Sure. So entrepreneurial spirit is really nothing more than a bias for action and the desire for that relentless pursuit of awesome. And that's what makes us so adaptive. It is about a little bit of common sense, not just doing because it's put in front of you, but really thinking about what it is you want to accomplish and how we can go about that. But it is that culture of experimentation. And when I said earlier, we're always in a state of beta, it lends itself to the teams to say, we are in a culture of experimentation. And what does that really look like? It's about challenging yourself to say, not when a challenge comes your way, oh, we can't do that, but how could we do that? Or how could we evolve that? Or if this is a challenge, what are the various perspectives that we can bring to it to perhaps challenge our thinking? And, the teams really lean in on each other. And that comes full circle to how you hire and cast, to make sure that you have teams that have the permission to lean in on each other and ask those questions. And, again, when it came back to COVID, because we're fiercely independent, we challenge convention. And when you challenge convention, you have the decision to move forward ahead of the curve. You have the very unique and advantageous position of making sure that your teams have permission to think a little bit differently. And some of that shows up even in the way you work. I mean, we're in each other's homes right now, right? Welcome to my home. But my home comes with some fun things in it. I have a dog that barks unexpectedly when the courier shows up. In other people's homes, they have children. The printer beside me goes off unexpectedly because someone in the house decides to print. All of those fun things that happen in our home life. And that entrepreneurial spirit has allowed our teams to also get together as teams and figure out how to work together. Between 4 and 5 in some houses, they need to be feeding their children. And so they're going to go offline, and that's okay. It means that those teams have figured out how to work together for the betterment of the team, the betterment of the client. And that's what entrepreneurial spirit shows up like.
Yeah, well, I can relate to virtually everything example you just gave, including the dog when the courier comes. It's the only time our dog barks, it seems. Finally, I want to ask Lori about the principle outcomes over optics. What does that mean, and how has that truly shaped your culture to what it is today?
Sure. So when you think about outcomes, you're thinking about the long term. You're thinking about playing the long game, and you're thinking about success at the very essence. You start asking yourself the questions. What problem are we really solving, and what does success look like when we get there? And if you can answer those questions, then you are playing outcomes over optics. And it goes beyond just your people and your clients. It goes outside into the broader world. And again, I'll lean in on COVID as the most recent example and amplified example. When COVID hit, the first thing we did was make sure we got all of our people home and safe. The second thing we did was start to look broader of how we could help the world deal with some of the immediate term issues, like getting masks. We actually constructed, based on a model used in Taiwan, intubation boxes for hospital, and sourced materials and constructed them literally in the garages of some people to get ourselves up and running to test the concept. Which helps just a tremendous amount of people when they need it at most. And then we wrote protocols, we wrote a lot of thought leadership, and then we shared it. So we put together a website called covid.klick.com, where we are openly and transparently sharing our knowledge and our experiences so that others can learn from them. We're in a global pandemic. We're in it together. Now is not the time to hold on to information. Now is the time to share it. So that all can benefit. And that is what outcomes over optics looks like.
Wow, those are some great examples. We've talked quite a bit here, and no wonder, about the pandemic. What has it taught you about the role of corporate culture?
What's really interesting about that is it does come back to companies being no more than people and principles. And if your principles live on a piece of paper or in a beautifully framed piece of art on the wall, but your teams, your leadership, every single person do not understand or live those principles, then they are simply that, words on a piece of paper. And COVID has taught us and amplified that realistically, if you want a high performance culture, you have to come back to the very foundational elements of what you believe and how you show up every single day. And, we have a cultural behavior pyramid, and on the very bottom of it is the essence and character that we are looking for in the people that work in our company. And that is optimism and kindness and empathy, words that are often not spoken about in corporate culture. And we don't mean optimism from a Pollyanna perspective, but we mean optimism in the perspective of can you help find solutions? If the first words out of your team's mouth is, oh, we can't do that, then you're not living an optimistic perspective. And so, you can find solutions or metamorphosize the opportunity, or metamorphosize even what the problem is. And that comes full circle back to, do you even understand the problem you're solving in the first place? So, what's it taught us? Principles matter. And they matter all the way from every single level in your organization to how you cast. So principles matter.
Let's look ahead, Lori. 3, 4, 5 years, whatever. What do you see as critical to aligning your people at Klick to your culture and to sustaining what has been an incredible high performance culture?
Oh, I really appreciate that question. Look, it's actually quite simple. There's nothing more to it than how you hire and how you cast your teams. And so if you really think about your hiring protocols, and you really think about who is interviewing, how you're interviewing, you're not just filling a role, you're filling a spot in your culture. And when you think about it through that lens, of how you enhance that culture through every single person that you add to the team, then you will create a high performance culture. If you think about your hiring as something that someone else takes care of, then you're not thinking about your culture through that lens, because every single person contributes to an amazing high performance culture. So it has been and always will be how we respond and create a high performance culture.
You've made it as simple as hire and cast, which is such a beautiful way to put it. It's a lot of work to maintain it, but you've made the focus pretty clear.
Yeah, but isn't it worth it? I mean, isn't it just exciting to see when you see teams come together? It's worth it. So, when you think, when you're solving challenges within your organizations, and you think upstream to how can you solve it so that it has a lasting impression on your organization and lasting change, we think about high performance culture in that way. And really, for us, the governor on our growth will always be hiring and casting.
Yeah,
Always.
very well said. What trends, what do you see coming in terms of the future of the broader field of building high performance cultures?
Well, trends, I hate to disappoint, but it's always coming back to hiring and casting.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's nothing more to be said about that. Trappings are simply that. They're trappings. If it's Pizza Wednesday that you think is creating your culture, it isn't. It is contributing to the value that you put on your team and the reward for things like that. But it is not creating your culture. Your culture was created the day that you hired someone, the experience that you gave them when you interviewed them. And we talk a lot about experience and creating great experience. And even when you're interviewing someone, they are interviewing you at the same time that you are interviewing them. They are trying to understand, what are you going to be like as an employer? How are you going to value me and the incredible skill and what I have to offer to your organization? It's not a one-way thing. And when you respect that interplay of how you hire people and the value that you put into those conversations, then you are already projecting what the culture will look like when they join you. And what I find really interesting, I meet all of our new hires. We're a large organization, but I make a point every week to have a fireside chat with all of our new Klicksters. And the reason I do that is for two reasons. One, I want to get to know them. I want to get to know who they are and what they bring to us at all levels of the organization. But more importantly, I want them to understand that they are in an organization where titles really don't matter. We're just people, and we're people wanting to do amazing things in the world, and we're wanting to bring amazing solutions. We have different roles to play, that is true, but we're just people who want to link arms and do amazing things. So we don't want anyone in the organization to be afraid to reach out to the CEO because of those three little letters. We don't want that. And so you really do need to put your people first. And that's another demonstration of how to do that.
Oh, thank you for that. That's well said. And when you're seeing them on the front end, you're certainly giving them opportunity throughout to walk through the door, virtually or otherwise, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Lori, last question, and it's more of a personal one, and that is, what piece of advice, if there was one piece of advice that you would give to a young person who's just starting out on their own high performance culture journey, what would that be?
I think I would offer a piece of advice I wish I had, which is listen more, speak less. I would say be consciously curious throughout your entire career. Read, listen to people, get mentors in your life, learn different perspectives and listen to those different perspectives, and get really thoughtful about the questions you ask when you are interviewing to join companies. Because it is this two-way street, what are their principles and how do they come to life? Kind of this conversation. How do they actually show it versus just the words? And when people get really thoughtful, in all interviews I do, I offer the opportunity for people to ask me questions. And I find it quite fascinating, the types of questions people will ask you. And I can tell you, the more thoughtful the question, the more likely we are to consider the candidacy strongly. Because you can understand the types of questions they will ask when they then arrive at your organization, and how they will think about understanding information. So that's the advice that I would offer.
And it's excellent advice. My colleague, Nicole Bendeley, who runs our Waterstone Culture Institute, which is our culture measurement and assessment and advisory, transformation and leadership development side, gave me a book to read called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And it's been a great, a great tool for someone who's been asking questions a lot in the executive search side in their professional life. So that resonated with me. Maybe not the young person you expected to resonate with, but still a lot to learn. So thank you for that, Lori.
It's interesting, Marty. We actually teach our organization the power of a great question.
Yeah, well, that's a great thing to teach, by the way. And they change, don't they?
They do. They absolutely
really do change. Yeah. So much to take out of today, but I think that the wonderful simplicity of hiring and casting is something that we should all kind of put not only to our minds, but in action on how important that is in shaping not only culture, but what culture does, which is drive performance. I love the relentless pursuit of awesome. It's not only aspirational, it touches on everything we do. It's one of those both aspirational and executional turns of phrase that I think you've captured, not to mention the other principles, none greater than people first. But I really also love the values of drive and optimism and kindness and empathy, because we often maybe don't think that those are the kind of things that can be represented within a high performance culture. But I would argue that they need to, even more in a high performance culture. And you, through your leadership at Klick Health, have really demonstrated that in the business and articulated it really well for us today. So I want to thank you again, our guest today, Lori Grant, the CEO of Klick Health, for sharing these with us, being so open with us, and really appreciate just how well you articulated exactly what you do in such a simple way.
Well, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Lori. And join us next week for another episode of Building High Performance Cultures. And in the meantime, if you'd like to learn more about the topic, please visit waterstonehc.com.